Myths of the Machine is brought to you by our sponsor, Mighty Man Limited. Be a master of the universe when you wear Mighty Man Limited athletic and sportswear, custom-designed athletic compression gear for male and female athletes, compression shirts, sports bras, yoga pants, hoodies, and more. Available only at mightyman.logosoftware.com. Be mighty. Since the time when men gathered around campfires and told tales of the warriors who challenged the monsters that gather in the dark. The mighty men who fought alongside the gods, some rising to victory, others falling to the abyss. These are the heroes who became the myths of the machine. Olivo ran. Jaime Olivo ran as fast as he could. He first thought getting off the one train a few stops early and switching his path back to his Riverdale apartment would help him lose the men following him, but it didn't seem to work. Not only did he not lose them, but they, apparently now 6 instead of the initial 4 he first noticed, exited the subway train when he did. Jaime hoped he could lose them in a crowd of people, but at 1 a.m. there were no crowds out tonight, and not especially with the hurricane weather conditions that soaked the city above him. The only crowd to exit his train were the men in trench coats who were following him. Jaime Olivo ran down Tunnel Street as if his life counted on it, because he was sure that it did. Most people called Tunnel Street the 191st Street Tunnel, as it connected the one train station stop to Broadway, and it was usually filled with groups of teens who used the passageway as a semi-private hangout. But only a lone homeless person who was pushing a shopping cart full of the day's collected refuse cans, shuffled towards the tunnel exit, towards the main thoroughfare that was Broadway. The tunnel echoed with the sound of Jaime's footfalls and his attempts to fill his lungs with air in the humid, dank, century-old passageway. Jaime heard the crashing of the can-filled shopping cart as it toppled to the ground. He quickly looked over his shoulder to see one of the 6 men pumping 6 bullets into the homeless person's chest, the fallen bum's body now laying atop the toppled pushcart. Jaime fingered his Noble Tech bracelet, and still no signal. He had no way to warn Katie or her large, bald friend. Of course, Jaime thought if the two were together, Katie's pal Archie was more than capable of protecting them both. It was Jaime's fat that was in the fire now, and he had no illusions that these people wanted him dead. They wanted him as dead as they had left Jaime's cyber hacker contact and source for his many irritating media revelations, exposing corruption at every level of government and big business. But when Cyber Stan informed him about the files that he had recently hacked, calling them Mr. Big's mother lode, Jaime knew the potential for danger increased 1,000-fold. When Jaime had arrived at Cyber Stan's 46th Street walk-up, what he saw was police taping it off and Stan's unmistakable girth zipped in a coroner's body bag where it was being loaded into an unmarked black van. He began to worry, but Jaime attempted to convince himself Stan was 58 years old, and he did weigh an unhealthy 310 pounds, and this heat the last week was terrible. It could have been natural causes. It could have been. But why the police tape? And why were there so many unmarked official vehicles on the block? Jaime knew something was wrong. He could feel it. Hell, he knew it now. Jaime was both lucky and unlucky that Cyber Stan was always thinking, and his compulsive paranoia compelled him, despite his unhealthy size, to go to extremes in order to ply his tradecraft of information gathering, exchange, and dissemination. "Shall we play a game?" Stan would shout at his multiple view screens after breaching the system security at a big pharma conglomerate who was charging $1,000 a tablet for a cancer drug that cost him only 3 cents to make. Or when he proved that local politicians were in cahoots with media and law enforcement to create the illusion of chaos, all to push crony contract deals and generate media advertising dollars that would be kicked back to politicians' slush funds. Jaime was lucky. Cyber Stan was a special effects geek, and that Stan's rooftop pigeon coop never actually contained pigeons. Stan's allergies would never allow for that type of interaction with the less-than-cleanly domestic carriers. Jaime was lucky. The caked layers of aged pigeon poop was really carefully placed and painted concrete, made to look soiled, with years of pigeon excrement. It was designed to openly hide Stan's hidden satellite uplink, antenna, and hard drive backup. It also served as a drop box for when Cyber Stan needed to pass information along too sensitive for the internet transmission. Had anybody ever stumbled across the pigeon coop, they'd look at it as a filthy mess and not as an insulated Faraday cage containing world-shaking technology. Jaime spun the combination lock to 5, 39, 27, and the lock popped open. Reaching under the lid of the most filth-caked coop, Jaime sprung the hidden trigger, which opened the drawer that contained the multi-terabyte drives. One of the drives had a single red flash drive with the letters NB written across them in marker ink. Jaime pulled the flash drive from the blinking data drive when he heard the soft whirl of mechanical wings. Jaime turned, and he saw a small drone not 15 feet from where he was crouched in the pigeon coop. Small red, green, and blue lights, like bug eyes, were lighting the drone's sides. Jamie tried not to move. He had hoped his paranoid friend had built the electronic shielding in his pigeon coop as well as he had bragged, and that it would hide him, in the way that it hid the expensive equipment tucked into the woodwork. Unfortunately for Jaime, it did work. The pigeon coop appeared to the distant drone operator's scanners as a huge black blot, which should not appear to the advanced scanning technology. The pigeon coop was designed to be hidden in plain sight, not from the advanced scanning technologies in the drones that sought out anomalies to its multi-band frequency scans. The drone sent out a silent signal detailing the location coordinates of the electronic cold spot, and its rotors spun it high and away from the pre-war tenement rooftop. Jaime exited the pigeon coop, locked it, and ran to the street-side rooftop overcropping and peered over. All attention and activity now were being directed to the entrances of the building to which he stood, and that which flanked Stan's building on the east and on the west. Teams of men streamed into the structures, heading to the respective rooftops. Jaime ran to the east side of the building he stood on and looked at the 5-foot gap between this building and the one next to it. He looked at the 70-foot fall to the alleyway below, if he didn't make the jump. It was only 5 feet. Anyone can jump 5 feet. But if he didn't, he'd break his legs, or his spine, or he'd land on his head and he would die. The rooftop door, 2 buildings away, burst open. Jaime could see the silhouette of a man who produced a pistol with a flashlight and a laser sight module attached. The next building roof door also burst open, as did the building where Jaime stood on the ledge. The 3 men focused on the pigeon coop, unaware Jaime was only 30 feet away. As they fumbled with the combination lock, the drone returned and hovered above them. Jaime knew he had to get off the roof quickly. As quickly as he could, Jaime climbed to the edge. Meanwhile, the drone's sensors picked up what appeared to be heat readings on the rooftop that led away from the coop to the opposite edge of the building. The drone lowered its altitude and followed the growing heat signature to the roof's edge. All it found was a larger, anomalous hotspot, but no person who might have made it. Another silent signal alerted the armed men who were now inside the electronic null space of the disguised pigeon coop. The men headed to where the drone hovered, their flashlights and laser pointers slowly scanning the darkness in front of them. Looking over the rooftop, they saw what looked like a man's torso splayed out in the alley. The drone lifted above the gunmen and slowly sank into the alleyway to examine the third anomaly. Jaime had landed on the old slaughterhouse roof, with 3 feet to spare. He stumbled over his feet when he had landed, his momentum forcing him to one knee before he had regained his feet and headed for the rooftop fire escape. As he climbed down the south face of the long-abandoned abattoir, the drone floated only 50 feet away, but blocked from sight by the building itself. The armed men would use the stairs to meet again with the now lower-than-street-level drone. "It's just a jacket," said one of the men who had left the rooftop. "You think?" responded a second man. "Pick the damn thing up and check it out. Drone says it's still hot." Jaime watched from the fast-food restaurant parking lot as the men went through the pockets of his jacket. He didn't think to untie it from his waist and throw it to the roof before he had jumped, so it fell when he was in midair and spun to the pavement below. Jaime had his house keys, his camera, his Nobletech, his wallet, and most importantly, the flash drive was still on his person. But as he accounted for his personal effects still in his possession, he realized the one item left behind in the jacket's breast pocket. It's a press pass. Jamie Olivo. Give me that, you numbskull, ordered the taller man. Jaime Olivo, idiot. He's the reporter. Metro 10. Metro 10? Jesus, declared a third member of the team. You got that right. The shit just hit the fan. The tall man, dressed identically to his compatriots in tan military utility gear and a black trench coat, held the press pass ID up to the drone scanners. As the RGB lights danced across the laminated card, electronic signals alerted secret override codes, allowing the drone operators to tap into every city surveillance camera. That's when Jaime began running. He should have run to the station. It was public, and he could get the information out. But instinct took over, and he headed home. Again, he thought, being in public would help hide him. But between the late hour and the storm, the crowds were thin as he traveled closer to his train stop. The crowd was non-existent. As Jaime got closer to the last steps that would take him to the street level, he could see the dark puddles of water that formed after streaming down from the street level staircase. He ran through the water and up the saturated concrete steps. That's when Jaime stopped running. As the pouring rain began to soak him, Jaime stood at Tunnel Street on Broadway. 6 more men stood in a semicircle around him, blocking his escape. Unlike the 6 who pursued him up to this point, these men were dressed in some sort of high-tech, form-fitting SWAT body armor. They looked like some sort of science fiction stormtroopers from space in the odd purple and green digital camouflage patterned gear and all-black face-concealing helmets. They held equally bizarre-looking rifles, like nothing Jaime had ever seen in his 25 years of news reporting, and they were all pointing at him. 2 black truck vans deployed some sort of searchlight that struck Jaime's eyes, blinding him temporarily.
Jaime Olivo, you are under arrest for violation of the Homeworld Security Council's Protection Directorate 27B. Resistance will be met with lethal force.
What? Asked Jaime. The Security Council? Who is the Security Council? Jaime had the time to ask before a balled fist impacted on the back of his skull, dropping him to his knees. Stunned, Jaime saw through now spinning eyes the 6 original pursuers who had donned black balaclava ski masks that matched their trench coats. The tall masked man addressed the armored team. We've got 3 down already. The order's for full containment, not detention. Grease 'em, leave 'em right now, and we exfil in 20 seconds. Jaime desperately thumbed his Noble Tech bracelet, but nothing happened. No Katie, no Archie, no amazing save. Not this time. This was it. Soaked to the bone, the falling rain. Jamie felt a chill, knowing he was going to die on his knees. And he would never even know why, without ever seeing the contents of Cyberstan's flash drive. Jaime put a hand up to block the light from his eyes. Wait! Behind the nylon balaclava, the tall man's face twisted in scorn as he produced his sidearm. He racked the slide back, arming the weapon, and lowered it to the kneeling reporter's head. As the van lights and pouring rain blinded Jaime Olivo's squinting eyes, he whispered a final word to himself. Katie. He waited for the skull-shattering bullet to strike. Jaime never heard the shot. What he did hear was a whirling sound and an impact on the gunman who fell to the ground right next to where Jaime was kneeling in the puddled water. Jaime tried to rub the excess water from his eyes as the steady flow of rain pounded down on all who stood underneath the torrential sky. Jaime could see a blur of a shadowy figure who was now engaging the baker's dozen in a brutal hand-to-hand combat. More whirl sounds, more crunching impacts, and falling bodies as armored men attempted to defend themselves from the speedy attacker. Several shots barked out and were followed immediately by ricocheting sounds, and, as suddenly as they had flashed on, the van searchlights were doused. Jamie could get a better look at what was occurring immediately in front of him. A mystery man had leveled 8 of the 12 men who had trapped Jamie and was now making quick work of the final 4, smashing their weapons with his kicks and what looked like a shield of some sort. A downward slash with the shield smashed the odd rifle in 2, a spinning crescent kick removing its wielder from the fray, a long kick to the helmeted face of another, and a traditional straight right fist to the armored jaw of the final fighter. The mystery man stood with his back towards Jaime. He wore a similar version of the body armor of the men that he had just defeated, just slightly different and all black in color, and with only half his face hidden by its own protective helmet. He was definitely carrying a shield that looked like it was made out of glass. Rain poured down on the armored figure as he looked at his brutal handiwork.